Well, Jeremy Vine is infamous for confronting drivers after filming them with his helmet camera and posting the videos on social media. And it's got many of you asking if cyclists are becoming too militant on the roads.
Well, Lewis Oakley is a learner driver and thinks that cyclists have too much power, but passionate cyclist Fran Foley Winston thinks motorists go out of their way to make life difficult for cyclists. Good to see you both this morning. Fran, what are you on about?
Hello. I know it's not all motorists, OK, and I know there are some bad cyclists, particularly people on the pay-as-you-go bikes who I think haven't been on bikes since they were at school and suddenly just go crazy on the roads. But I've had examples where cars have driven into cycle lanes. I nearly lost my arm a couple of years ago when I was signalling to turn and a car literally swung into me, and it was literally nanoseconds and I could feel it whizzing by. It grazed my arm. My arm would have come off. I've had the cars driving into puddles because I think it's hilarious to soak you. I was forced onto a tram track by a car coming around a corner one day, and then my wheel got caught in the tram track and I went off my bike. And these are all in designated cycling areas. I'm not breaking any rules. I'm following the rules of the road. They're just three examples. There's probably loads more I could go into, but some of them the language probably wouldn't be appropriate for this hour. But it's unbelievable. And particularly with cycle lanes, I've know some cycle lanes have had to put barriers up to stop the cars driving into them. And I just don't understand why we can't all live in unison. You know, particularly if you're following the rules of the road. I do wear the high vis, I do signal, I'm not going through red lights or anything. So if I'm being courteous to you, why can't they just be courteous to me?
Is this then something that you'd welcome, Fran? So what Jeremy Vine is suggesting, if a car sees you behind them in their mirror, they let you pass by?
Not necessarily, because, I mean, there's a lot of factors to take into account. There's the width of the road, the whole lot. It's not always practical to pull out and let somebody by. And, I mean, I know Jeremy Vine has said that he's faster than cars, but I'm just trying to get to point A to point B alive. So I'm not necessarily trying to, pass out every car on the road. But I do think, particularly, say, coming up to traffic lights, there's an awful problem where cars will squeeze together. Bikes can't get through them. We're supposed to be up at the top of the traffic light for when the lights go green, and it is as if they do it deliberately. It happens so frequently. Either that or they have absolutely no spatial awareness, in which case I would question their qualifications to be on the road anyway. But there are a lot of factors to take into that. Not everybody is going at the speeds Jeremy is. Not everybody wants to go at the speeds Jeremy is. I know I certainly haven't, but I do think there could be a lot more courtesy on the roads.
Lewis, as someone who is learning to drive in all of this, I mean, do you think that you need to understand the needs of cyclists more, or should the car be king?
Well, I think the car is king, but with that comes a responsibility. It is my job as someone that is learning to drive to ensure the safety of everyone. And it'd be so much easier to do that if some cyclists, not all, would obey the laws of the road, because my reactions aren't as quick. It's not as slick as a driver at the moment. I'm learning to drive, so when it's a green light for me and I go, and a cyclist comes out of nowhere, it's a process to me. Do I slam on the brakes? Wait, what's behind me? Oh, it's too late. It's happened. So that's why, thank God, your driving instructor is there. But yeah, and you kind of see, you mentioned the bollards as well. Even now that you've got the cycle lanes with the bollards, not only are you worried as someone that's, trying to figure out, wait, am I in the right position of the car that you're going to crash into them? But I've definitely had on multiple occasions, an ambulance will come behind you. And then it's like, well, I can't pull in on the left because there's bollards, I can't go into oncoming traffic, and I can't go forward, so what are we going to do?
Do you think cyclists have become overly militant?
I think some cyclists have, and I think that, all we really need is for everyone to obey the laws of the road. And, my biggest issue with the cyclists that are naughty is not really as a learner driver, it's as a parent, because the amount of times I have got my two babies in the pram in front of me and step out onto a zebra crossing or at a normal crossing, and a cyclist just comes out of nowhere and misses your kids by inches. It's terrifying. Why do you need to do that? Where are you going? Why can you not obey the laws of the road? And you might say, well, it's not all cyclists that do that. But even if it's just 10%, we're human beings. And as parents, we are programmed to see danger. So if I have had, 10% of cyclists that have passed me by have just, weaved around my pram. Or even I remember once when my other half was pregnant, one went so fast next to her pregnant belly, missed it by inches. It's like, you're a danger. Why are you not following the rules?
So, I mean, I tell you what I'm getting from this very clearly, Fran, is that, as you say, there are some irresponsible, bad drivers, and as Lewis says, there are some irresponsible and bad cyclists. That would seem to say the problem is reasonably straightforward. Whatever Jeremy Vine says, actually, it's back to your initial point. We all need to show respect for each other on the roads.
Well, yeah, I mean, they are vehicles. I know some people think of bikes and they think of them nearly as a toy, but they're not. They are vehicles. So, people should treat it like it's another vehicle on the road. I mean, I have to get my bike serviced, make sure that it's fit for the road and what have you, the same way that drivers do with their cars. And I do think, obviously, that a lot of people do respect that, but then there are those who don't. And maybe even having something like people have to do a cycling test before they're allowed on the roads or something might help, because I have encountered irresponsible cyclists as well. But I don't understand with motorists why they can't just basically stay in their lane. And the point about the bollards, they wouldn't have to put up bollards if motorists weren't going into the cycle lanes. So it's creating all sorts of problems just because people, those 10% or whatever figure, just aren't sticking to the rules. I genuinely do not know why any car would have to pull into the cycle lane. And quite often it does happen early in the morning. Maybe there's a traffic jam and they think they're going to get out a bit quicker, but it just causes all sorts of problems. And there's no need for it. They know the rules of the road, or they're supposed to know the rules of the road. And I know, like, it's not all motorists, but it's enough that it's causing problems and accidents.
But I think the problem here is that a lot of people will hear what you're saying, and that's fine, but then say, well, hold on, you're not accountable in any way. First of all, we've given you half the road and you don't pay road tax, one. Number two, and this is what I always think about when people come within inches of my kids at whatever speed they're going at on these bikes, is like, if you had hit my kid and broken their leg, I would never be able to find you. You don't have any sort of license plate or registration number. You're totally unaccountable. And that's why it kind of feels to people on the streets and people in cars that it's like, oh, I'm a vehicle when it's convenient, but when it's not, then I'm a pedestrian and through the red lights I go.
Okay.
Well, I always consider it a vehicle, and I wouldn't have any problem with a registration or a tax. And I think a lot of the responsible cyclists who are using it as a mode of transport, who treat it as a vehicle, wouldn't have an issue with that.
Let's do it then.
Yeah, well, look, there you go.
I think we've actually reached a conclusion here, which is that everybody needs to stick in their lane.